Hey, it's Watch Complications. I'm Brian. Check out my site, watchcomplications.com. Subscribe here, ring the bell if you want updates, and follow me on Instagram at watch_complications. I have my little mini series going on making custom dials with Waterslide Decals. I've done lots of experimenting and testing. Now, when it comes to making custom dials, I show a variety of ways, more formal ones like pad printing to sort of more efficient, lower cost ways of creating custom looks on watch dials, like with Waterslide Decals. That's why I'm doing this mini series on decals, so that if people are getting into watch modding, maybe you want to make very simple changes, add some custom text, logo, or something to a pre-made dial. This is giving insight into the process, at least that I've found in my experimentation, that works pretty well. So hopefully you're all finding it helpful. I'm going to keep this up. And I'll move on to testing other stuff as well, not just Waterslide Decals, but I've done all kinds of dial stuff. Look into my videos. So in the grand scheme of things, in the videos I've made so far in this mini-series on making custom dials with Waterslide Decals, I've tested a variety of things. I tested different types of paper. I was kind of settled on one I really liked. I've done a lot of print testing. I've done a lot of process testing. So like, how long do I bake the dial at what temperature? I've tested chemical compounds to help with adhesion, microset, microsol, and I've tested color versus black and white and figured out, some specifics around what colors work well at what size and scale. That was the previous video. And then now I'm going to test components on dials through the baking step. So for example, if you want to add some customization, some text, logo, something to a pre-made dial, the question is going to come up, well, if I put a Waterslide decal on this pre-made dial, I just want to add something extra to it, what happens to those markers or the logo, if there is one, or lume, if I put it in the oven for that baking step? Well, that's this video. I'm going to show you a variety of dials that have indices that are applied in various ways with adhesive, that are soldered with epoxy, logos that have adhesive, ink from Waterslide decals and other types of ink, lume, what happens to lume when you put it in the oven for that amount of time. So this is going to be sort of an experimentation, a testing video. Say, okay, what happens to these other things on a dial when it goes through that baking step? Now, based on what I've done in previous videos around color, around process, and all of that stuff, along with this video and what happens to some other things that are on dials whenever you put it in that baking step. Next video, I'll take pre-made dials that have all of this stuff on them and just customize it a little bit, right? A little bit of custom text, or maybe put my logo on a pre-made dial that has markers with lume on it. But I want to experiment and test for myself what happens to these things. Sure, I could look at maybe some other videos, read some stuff online. Being the scientist I am, I like testing things for myself. That's what we're going to do in this video. So let me show you the dials and let's do some experimentation.
Something I want to mention as I get into these tests today, this is more for the future. The dials that I've tested so far with the Waterslide decals have been white dials with black printing. But in a future video, I'm going to test a black dial, maybe with applied lume indices, and I'm going to try some sort of like orange or red texts, some other colors that might stand out okay on black, yellow perhaps even, and see how that goes. So yes, I have focused on lighter colored dials so far, but I am going to do tests on a dark colored dial in a future video at some point.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is take a look at 4 different dials, each having some different characteristics that I want to test what happens to them when I put them in the oven. First one has got soldered indices. So these are soldered on, you can see there in the back, and should be fine, but just want to verify that. I also have an applied logo on a smooth surface, and I want to see how weak that adhesive gets that's on the back of these electroplated or electroformed nickel stickers. So I want to test that. I'm testing with logos that weren't quite right in terms of the scale, so they're kind of just laying around and I can use them for testing on materials and things. So dial 1 has soldered indices, also testing the applied logo on smooth metal. So the second dial has a couple things going on as well. The indices on this dial are using some sort of an epoxy or adhesive, so it's not solder. So I'm going to see what this might be and how it holds up. Again, should be fine, but we'll see. Notice that the numerals, the 12, 3, and 6, are actually stamped while the other hour indices are applied. Sometimes you'll get a mix of those things, but I want to test the applied ones. I also have the adhesive logo on this slightly rigid surface, so I want to see how it holds up. There are very tiny gaps on this particular subdial. You can see them there, which gives more room for air and heat to get underneath of it perhaps, and this is quite small, so I want to see how that does. Notice there's quite a bit of dirt on this. I need to clean it up. It's been a dial that I just handled a lot testing. I've tested different kind of paint and removal from it, so it's gone through a lot. I want to see what happens if I bake it with the dirt on, also how well that cleans up. That's more for me, not really about the adhesive and how these things do in the oven. That's just something I want to kind of know for myself. The third dial has what I think are applied indices on it. Now I'm not sure. These could be stamped, but I don't think so. But it would have to be stamped from the front, because if you look at the back of this one, notice there's no pins or soldering. There's no stamping that's been done on this one. So my assumption is these are probably applied with some sort of an adhesive. You'll have to just put it in the oven and see if I can heat it up and move them around a little bit, or how easy it is, or if they just hold up and they're solid. That's again sort of a not quite known, but just going to test that out. Had it laying around, want to see how that does. And what many of you might be thinking about is, what if I have a dial that has lume on it and I want to put a Waterslide decal on it? So mostly a pre-made dial. Maybe it has indices, maybe it has lume on those indices, maybe whether it's printed lume or it's lume inside of like square, triangle, or circular indices. What does lume do? Pros, cons, once it's been put in the oven. I just want to test, so I have applied just directly on the surface varying amounts of lume. I have some very thin lines and dots. I have some thicker ones where it's got a few more layers on it. Here's a bigger dot right here. I want to see if the properties, shapes, texture of the lume changes any once it's put in the oven. I will test, lume indices and markers maybe in a future test, and I just want to get started on that. So got a couple things going on here. This is a Waterslide decal, one of my earlier tests from a previous video. So this has printer ink on it. I want to see if that holds up and does fine once it's back in the oven again. Probably will, I think. So that should be fine. Also have an applied logo on a painted surface, plus testing the lume. So testing quite a few little things here. I'm testing applied logos on a variety of surfaces, painted, smooth metal, and a little bit of rigid metal. I'm testing different types of adhesion when it comes to the markers. We have soldered, we have epoxy, and we have applied. And then I'm also going to take a couple of my logos and test them along with, while everything else is going on. I'm going to put one of these on the smooth dial surface and see how that does in the oven. And I'm also going to try it on this more rigid surface. Now this is type B paper. If you go back and look in my earlier videos, it's meant for rigid surfaces. There's a type A, which can be used on smoother surfaces as well. So you could use a type A maybe on this one, but I have type B and it seems to be working really well for me. So I'm going to put this Waterslide decal on the smooth surface and on the heavily ridged surface. I assume that this will have some trouble adhering on the Guilloché, but I have not tried it with the full-on process that I've sort of got nailed down. I've shown in my past couple of videos with the micro set, the micro sol. It may adhere okay to this, and if it does, awesome. So I thought, why not just add that to the tests overall? So the next thing I'm going to do is go through the process that I outlined in my earlier videos and apply these two logo Waterslide decals to these two dials. I'll quickly show you what they look like with the decal plastic still on them. Then we'll pop them in the oven and then we'll see what happens. So it'll take me about 30 minutes to get these on the dials, and we'll be right back. Well, I wasn't exactly planning on showing any of this process, but I will kind of get it started here with these decals because I've shown this in other videos. This is micro set. I am a little curious what it will do, if anything, to the surfaces of these dials. This one just might mix the dirt with it. Micro set, you can see it's kind of bunched up a little bit there on the surface of this smooth metal. It stays on the surface of paint too, but it also absorbs it a little bit. Nothing wrong with having a little bit there on the surface before applying it, however. Here I'm not really trying to get it like centered on anything. I just want to get it nice and flat. Now these are film free, so there shouldn't be any film residue on the dial markers or anything once you remove it. Put just a little bit more micro set on there. I'll let that dry for 10-15 minutes. I can tell you from a little bit of prior testing that this one is going to be a lot harder because of the grooves. The plastic from the decal is going to want to stick right away, and so it becomes hard to move, but then you can press against it and hit it the right way and it just slides off once air gets underneath of it. So again, on these I'm not worried about having it centered or any particular direction. I will say that the micro set could almost work as a cleaner. Cleaned up that spot on the dial pretty quick. Set it down somewhere nice. Put some micro set on here before it, see how it wants to move around. But then once this thing gets set in place with the micro set, probably won't want to move very easily, especially once you let it dry. So you can just tip it just a little bit and it'll squeak one way or the other. You can already sense how much harder that would be to work with to get, in the spot you want. Looks about as good as I dare to mess with it. Aha. So here's a casualty. Knew this sort of stuff would happen. That's why I'm testing it. Notice what has happened to this applied one. Look at that. So it looks stamped on the reverse, which it is. That's raised, but it's also got a polished application on top of it, and the micro set has removed the adhesive. It's impacted the adhesive. This is why I'm doing this on test dials. I could use some GS Hypo Cement to reapply that marker. This is going to sound weird, but that's excellent news, because if you have markers that are applied, micro set could potentially remove it. Youch. Okay, watch out for that one, my friends. So I'm gonna pull this back over here and put some micro sol on it. So luckily these markers are soldered, so I don't have to worry about those coming off. So let that dry for 10-15 minutes. I'll also put the micro sol on this dial, and we'll put them in the oven for 20 minutes at 225 Fahrenheit, and then we'll see what it looks like when we remove them and get everything else out of the oven too, see what kind of impact dials have once we put them in the oven. Like this one, now I'm kind of wondering with these numerals if the oven will ruin that adhesive under there as well. It's really going to come down to how the markers are applied, what you set the temperature of the oven at, what chemicals you use on the dial. But this is giving helpful insight already. For example, the micro set, probably microsol too, can do a number on applied indices. Okay, so now all of these are going to go in the oven at the temperature I use for Waterslide decals, because that's the maximum length and temperature I would use, 20 minutes at 225 Fahrenheit.
All right, so first thing I'm going to check is on this little dial. It's a little warm, cooled off. I want to see if these little markers move at all. Oop, nope, they don't. I'll push pretty hard on that just to see. So those work okay. I don't know, again, if that's an adhesive. They're definitely raised above the surface. As you can see, they really look like thin applied markers. They've got to be. I just pushed on that 4 really hard with my pegwood, and it didn't budge, and this just came out of the oven. So that worked okay. Now I want to look at this dial. I'm going to push on this 3. It's not wanting to move really. Remember, the micro set took that 1 off of there. Oh, there it went. So I gave the 3 a push here, and with very little effort, it popped off of there. So whatever adhesive is being used on this particular dial, again, these are stamped on the back, and then what they're doing is they're putting a polished numeral on top. And I could probably put some hypo cement or some sort of adhesive and glue that back on if I wanted to. Let me see how much weaker this 10.6 logo is after the heat. These are kind of movable on the ridges anyway, so I'm kind of just getting an idea of how movable. That's pretty solid, actually. Move a little bit, maybe? But I'd really have to push to move that. So the adhesive backing that comes on my nickel-plated stickers is a lot better than whatever the cheap stuff they're putting on these numerals right here, because that's pretty solid. Of course, the epoxy on the back is fine, nice and solid. Didn't figure there'd be any issues with that. So our main issue on this type of a dial is if you've got one that's got very thin applied markers or numerals, like it has on this one. See there? It's almost about the same thickness as these. But whatever adhesive was used here a long time ago on this one, this is an old dial. A lot better, than whatever is used on this. This is a somewhat of a cheaper dial. It's only costs like, I don't know, 20 bucks, something like that. The adhesive on the logo is pretty good. Be interesting for me, again, I'm not going to show it in this video, but how easy it is to clean the dirt on the dial after baking it. So I'll have to check that out. Okay, so one other thing I want to test real quick is the adhesive on these logos after I've baked it. I think it's actually more solid after baking it than if you just set it, to be honest, which is kind of wild. Test it on this one. Yeah, same thing. So what's really interesting about this is my applied logos are actually seem more adhered to the surface after baking them than if I don't. If I don't, it still seems to, from time to time, if you push on it real hard, it move just a little bit. But after baking it, these aren't wanting to move at all. What that's really tempted me to do is, once I've put my logo on a dial and I know it's right where I want it, bake it for a little bit, 15, 20 minutes, 200 to 225, and it might really just adhere it to the surface. This is pretty solid, much more solid than if you don't. That's just, again, useful information. I'm going to put a bulleted list in the description below of sort of the lessons learned, and I may put them in the video itself, but I'll certainly put them in the description and with the blog post on this. Of course, the ink from the Waterslide decal was not impacted at all. It's fine. Let me see if the lume still holds an okay charge, holding up to the light for a few seconds. Lume still works fine. So here's the before and after pictures of the dial with lume.
So as you can see, the dials basically look the same. If anything, the baking has lightened the green color just a little bit, mellowed out a few of the minor imperfections, and the lume actually works a little bit better from what I can tell.
With the dial with the soldered markers, of course they're fine. No issues there. Give them a push and a tug. Those aren't going anywhere, so that's okay. All right, so the last thing I want to do is remove the decal plastic from the two dials that I wanted to test. I'm having a hard time actually seeing where the edge of this one is. So let me find it here. There we go. And let's see if this actually adhered. I can't imagine it did really well, but you know what? I've been a little bit surprised in this video already, so I guess we'll see. And yeah, sure enough, you can see how that transfers or doesn't transfer. See, most of it is still on the paper, which is what I kind of expected. So yeah, always use applied markers when you're dealing with Guilloché, or else pad printing would be okay as well. Even that looks a little bit strange sometimes, but you can get away with it just fine with a good high quality pad printer and multiple rounds of printing so that it has some depth, some height to it. But if you're just doing laser jet, inkjet print transfer with a Waterslide decal, it's just not going to work. So there you go. Useful information. I'm going to assume that this one actually looks okay. So let's get underneath the edge of paper here. Here we go. And we will pull that up. Okay. So transfer just fine. Again, sort of expected that would probably be the case. Now, this is film-free Waterslide decal paper. However, this is a metal dial with a particular amount of shine on it, and notice that you can see a film on it. Now the question becomes, how easily can that be cleaned off? And what do you use to clean it off? So remember, anything you put on this has the potential to mess with the surface. This looks pretty good on printed dials, but on a metal dial that has, let's say, a sunburst pattern or something else, it may not come out looking as good. What I want to do is take some different cleaners and try those on removing that. It's not even sticky really, it's just a film of where the decal was. Even though it's film free, it's not sticky, it's not going to clump up or anything, but it still messes with the color and the pattern of the dial. And that's a potential issue. So I want to try two things on this just to see if they have any difference. First thing I'm actually going to try is water. So I've taken a Q-tip here, and I've just dipped it in some water. And I'm going to rub it around on this surface and see if that just takes that away. It'd be awesome if it did, but I don't have high hopes. I want to run it over the ink just as well to see if we start to lose some of our ink and transfer. Okay. You can see there a little bit of a subtle difference. It's smooth. Again, it's not sticky, but it has messed with the pattern a little bit. So the water is definitely not removing that visual change that it's made to the surface. We'll try something with a little bit more oomph maybe. So I'm going to use some alcohol. Again, I'm just going to do a very subtle change here. I'll try to keep this where you can see it. Kind of do it up here above the logo first. Of course, it's kind of hard to tell. Trying to stay away from the ink initially and see what it does to the edges there. Kind of hard to tell, isn't it? Take the water with a drier end and sort of rub it across there. Clean that up. See if we can get a different visual look here. I'm not seeing it as much, are you? It's there a little bit right around the 10.6. So the rubbing alcohol does a trick. Now, the only place I didn't cover was the actual logo in that 10.6. So let me rub that over the top, and hopefully you don't want to spend too much time on it probably. My guess is after a certain amount of rubbing, you're going to see the logo start to go away. Again, I'm just testing it, and sure enough, that's starting to go away. So you'd have to use some sort of a tool and apply it very carefully to get this to go away, where it doesn't bother the surface and muck things up. Okay, so what's happening to this dial, and I figured this might be the case, is the texture on top, that coloration of the dial is a surface that's been placed on top of what's probably an aluminum blank. Yeah, it's an aluminum blank. And so what you're seeing is the surface of that starting to get wiped away. If you're going to apply Waterslide Decal to a metal surface, directly to a metal surface that has like a sunburst pattern, whatever, you're going to potentially run into trouble. And that is because if there is a visual residue from the decal paper, then you've got to come up with some way to get it off there. Just water's not going to work. If you go with even a subtle chemical, like rubbing alcohol, it's not like I'm using acetone, it's going to start working away very quickly at the surface of whatever is giving the texture or the dial some character. If I was going to do this on this exact dial, I would have stopped where I initially did, and that was I just used a little bit of water and then a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and it got those edges, right, that coloration away, and it was fine. But as soon as I got a little bit more rubbing alcohol and went over the logo itself, it was too much, and it's started to rub away. And now, you've basically messed up the dial at this point. Again, these are all on purpose. I'm doing these tests just for myself so I can kind of know what to expect if I am to work on different dials in different ways. So for myself, I know what I prefer for my logo is to go with an applied logo if possible. The design looks good with it. And then if I'm going to do Waterslide Decal, it really is best on a painted surface, particularly the one that would have a matte finish. It's just going to look better at the end of the day. The lume still came out pretty okay. Once you get into other types of surfaces, whether those are metal surfaces with certain patterns on them, guilloché, sunburst, or even just any kind of metallic looking texture, you're going to muck up the visualization for whenever the light hits it, certain angles and such like that. One thing I'm going to consider now and test at some point in the future is, once I've got a final dial built for myself or someone else, is just baking it just for a little bit, just to really adhere that logo to the surface, because that seemed to work on all three of these, that it just made it more solidified on the surface, which is very nice. Well, that was a fun array of tests. Hope you got something out of it. I know I did.
Okay, so that's one more step in my little mini journey on using Waterslide decals to make custom dials. I really do hope you have found this little series helpful, particularly if you're getting into watch modding. The reason I've done some of this is so that I could go through the process, learn it myself, and be a little bit more confident going into the next step, which we'll see soon, of taking a pre-made dial, maybe something that someone sourced on eBay or from a parts distributor, and maybe that watch dial has some printing already on it. Maybe it has some indices or markers applied. Maybe it has some lume on it. what happens when you put it in the oven. We've tested all of that. I kind of am more confident about what to do in terms of the process, what temperature, what length, what I should worry about, what I should not worry about whenever I want to test these dials, and putting some customization into them. If you're into watch modding, you buy a dial and like, I like that, I like the look of it, I want to put it in a watch, but I'd like to add a little custom text, or I want to add my logo to it. What happens when I put a Waterslide decal on this pre-made dial that has this other stuff on it? That's what we're going to do coming up next in this series. I'm Brian, this is Watch Complications. Check out the site, watchcomplications.com. Subscribe here, ring the bell if you want updates. Follow me on Instagram at watch_complications. I am out.